Well, boys, for this week, something I wanted to share. I'm not one that's when a new movie comes out, I'm like, I gotta see it right away, even though I want to see it. It's just one of those things where I know it'll be there, right? I'll eventually get around to it. So I don't. So this weekend, finally had a little bit of extra time. Weather is starting to get not super great around here. So Sunday night, let's watch a movie. Also, my fiance doesn't really can't really stay awake for a movie that's more than an hour and a half long. So it's a little challenging when I'm like, "Are you going to fall asleep during this movie?" And the answer is almost always yes. So if we started early enough, we're fine. So one movie that we've been wanting to get around to and finally watch is Rocketman, the biopic about Elton John. And again, this movie came out last year, so I'm sure other people have seen it. So I'm not going to break down the film or anything like that. I will say it was incredible. I'm not like a huge Elton John fan. I do like his music. I think he's fantastic as a musician, as a performer. But, just fairly casually, I was jamming Elton John like all week, all yesterday and today. These songs from this movie, these songs are so great. But the movie is really, really good. So if you're like me and haven't seen it yet, need to get around to it. I couldn't recommend it anymore, how great that movie is. But it got me thinking to something that Elton John's like 73 years old. He literally just retired from touring, right? He's been doing it for 50 years and he's finally given the time to his family. And after you see the movie, you'll kind of understand a little bit more why. But it just got me thinking about like in 25 years from now, when we are our parents' ages and starting to like get into that grandparents phase even, but more so when we're our parents' ages, like who in our generation, artists of today, are still going to be touring and performing bangers night in and night out and are going to be able to do that? Like people like Elton John. Elton John sings and plays at the piano. Billy Joel, same exact way. Billy Joel is still touring and performing and selling out venues, and people are rocking to all of those hits that are 20 and 30 and 40 years old. Paul McCartney, I don't need to say anything more than that. Even like a band like the Rolling Stones, still going out, still touring. They probably shouldn't be, but they still are. And they're still doing it with some sort of like energy and enthusiasm, right? So I don't know if it's just the style of music and how it was then and how that's easier to translate decades down the road. But I don't know if I see anybody that is an artist of today or even from the 90s. Most of the artists from the 90s aren't touring anymore, aren't releasing music. I mean, yeah, like the Backstreet Boys came back and they've done a couple of tours, but they're not going to be doing that in 25 years, like dancing around, gray hair, bald heads. That's not going to be happening. You see Justin Timberlake doing that maybe? Justin Bieber? Definitely not. There's no way. He's going to be out way quicker than most of these people. Like Beyonce? Like how can you again, there's just so much of a show, so much showmanship now. And the way that music has evolved, there's so many more layers to it where these simpler artists of Elton John and Billy Joel and Paul McCartney, where they just play an instrument and sing, that can last over time. Maybe Taylor Swift can get away with it, but she's not going up there and swinging off of a snake and singing Bad Blood in 25 years. And I mean, we'll be there. I'll say that we'll be there if she is, but it just has me kind of wondering what concert like will be like for us and who that's still an artist, a current artist today is going to be able to maintain a career and also want to do it. Right. I think that there's more artists. The tours are bigger. So there's a tendency to be like piecing out of your career a lot earlier than you need to be. You don't need to burn yourself out. These people are going to make way more money. New music is going to be creeping up constantly for them. So maybe they aren't able to stay as relevant as new music comes into the fold. But it just had me thinking, wow, it's going to be very interesting to see how that unfolds. And if we're still going to be able to go and see some of these artists 25 years from now, and if they're still going to be able to be just as good, because people like Elton John, Billy Joel, Paul McCartney are able to do that, and it's still a good show. So I don't know. Does that sound weird? Do you guys have any artists that come to mind where you're like, no, we're going to be fine? They're going to be Jay-Z is going to be up there with Graybeard, and he's still going to be bumping around, and we're still going to be there.
Well, listen, first off, I'm offended because you said when the Backstreet Boys are old and bald, and AJ's been bald for years and
You're right.
he
You're
still
right. Good
kicked the
fact check.
shit out of those performances, okay?
Good fact
So
check.
respect to AJ. No, as you're saying all that, I'm just like trying to picture like Blink 182 when they're like 60.
Right? Right?
And it's so weird. Yeah, that's so weird.
Yeah, but Dan, the thing is, I think all of them will. Okay,
Do you really?
let me say this again. I think everybody who just makes music, and music is what we know them for, they will all be performing and touring. Maybe not as much as those guys because all of their record deals, like if you pay any attention to like what, those record deals they signed in like the 70s and stuff like that, like there's a reason why like people that are legends are still performing because like what we think are like we think the money they made nothing. Like Stevie Wonder is still on the road, like still blind and old as hell on the road. Like, so is Elton John, so is Barbara Streisand. Like, all these people are all still on the road. And I think people who just make music, and that's what we know them for. Because, like, Rihanna, I feel like the reason why she is so big on her makeup line is because she can make like $1 billion off of that. She will not be on the road. You know what I mean? Like, Jay-Z makes so much money outside of music. He will not be on the road forever, unless he just decides he wants to do it. But, like, I think a lot of people will. Like, I believe that, like, Nelly will be touring and playing casinos the same way that like bands that like my parents go to casino, they'll be like, oh yeah, Little Anthony and the Imperials are playing at blah 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 blah, and I'm like, who the hell are Little Anthony and the Imperials? And I look it up, like, oh, they had like 3 number 1 hits back in 1930 or whatever the hell, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I see why they're there. And I'm like, that's how it's gonna be. We're gonna be sitting around and be like, hey, you want to go down to the casino see Nelly? I'm like, like,
See, that worries me. That worries me because I don't know what that's going to be like.
That sounds fantastic. That makes me feel better about aging. If I could just go see Nelly, yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. It's like you're gonna go down to like the Millville County Fair or whatever, and you're gonna see Nelly.
But you're making a good point, Didi, because there's so many more opportunities for artists now to make money in other ways. Where that's another reason why I don't know if they will continue to tour because of how grueling that is. You mentioned the contracts for some of those older artists. They go to that into that in the movie a little bit. So that's a really good point. But I hope they are. I really hope they are. I think certain people can and will if their music can, again, somehow adapt to playing as a 60-year-old up on stage. But it's just so weird how the evolution of music has changed where somebody just sitting up there with an instrument singing and performing, that's not how it really is anymore. There's so much showmanship more to that now. Most musicians don't play their own instruments because there's just such a big production with it, and that's a good thing. But it just had me kind of looking into the future a bit, going, man, like who are our kids going to be like? Okay, yeah, I'll go see that with you. I'll go see that artist because I've seen Billy Joel. I'd go see Elton John. I've seen some. I'm waiting for Paul McCartney to come back to go to the tour state so I can finally check that off the bucket list. I hope that our kids will be like, yeah, I'll go to see Nelly with you. I know a couple of those. I know Country Grammar. I hope, Didi.
Good God. I'm sorry, Nelly. I'm sorry. You were just the first name that came to mind. There's a lot of names I could have used. I feel really bad. I just used Nelly's name, but I know you listen to this podcast, Nelly. I'm so sorry.